Two world wars couldn't close French cinemas, but after 125 years in operation, every movie theatre in France closed its doors on the 14th of March because of COVID-19. 3 months later, cinemas are reopening. And we can cross now to our film critic, Lisa Nesselson, who's at one of Paris's cinema complexes. Lisa.
There's been a countdown clock on several cinemas around town waiting for this very moment. And I don't know if we can say, come on in, the water's fine. But there were indeed people here of all ages waiting to see the very first show at 9:30 this morning. At 1 minute past midnight last night, a handful of gung-ho French cinemas had a screening, including here in Paris at the Saint-Martin, where they sold out and had to actually open an adjacent screen to accommodate the overflow. For movies, we'll see if what recent surveys have said turns out to be true, and that's that 45% of habitual filmgoers have said that they do very much plan to go and buy a ticket in a movie theater in the next 4 weeks. Now, you may wonder what new exciting film is there to lure them out to do that. And the fact is, here in France, that really doesn't matter all that much. Of the 6,000 screens, 40% of them are classified as art houses. That's unique on earth, and that means that French people are perfectly happy to pay money to see an older film or a film that's being re-released. I think that's helpful because less than half of the films that are available this week are new films. Audiences that were still untapped in March will have a chance to see the movies that were cut off in mid-showing when the theaters closed. And that includes, they're also going to bring back a lot of the biggest hits of 2019, including films like Alice and the Mayor and Green Book. And here at this theater, they haven't forgotten children. They're going to have 2 daily screenings of Minions movies. And to give kids the idea of what social distancing is, they've actually put a stuffed Minion on every other seat so the kids will sit where they're supposed to.
Well, here are some of the happy film goers at the midnight screening.
On est là ce soir pour assister à la séance Les Parfums à minuit 1 pour la réouverture des cinémas.
Son cinéma, c'est compliqué quand même.
Le soir du confinement, le soir où tout s'est arrêté, on était là à la dernière séance et c'était normal qu'on soit là à la première.
Il y a l'atmosphère, il y a le grand écran, il y a le noir, il n'y a pas de distraction. Voilà, c'est ça le cinéma.
Well, they're certainly happy to be back, and so is the industry, Lisa.
That's right. You know, streaming platforms may be convenient, and it's definitely true that a lot more people signed up for streaming services at home. But they don't, as a general rule, make money for anybody except the streaming services themselves. And France is absolutely leading the charge to make outfits like Netflix or Amazon pay their fair share of taxes. 2019, these statistics are brand new, was absolutely a banner year across Europe, and over 1 billion tickets sold. And that means profits were up 6.3%, with the average price of a ticket in Europe being 7.2 euros. And the champion for tickets sold is Russia, right ahead of France. Until the pandemic, the French film industry was robust. It's designed as a sort of self-sustaining virtuous circle. That means that every time you buy a ticket to see a movie, whether it's for an American blockbuster or an intimate French film, about 10% of the ticket price goes into a fund to make future French films. The National Center for Cinema, that's a government organization, is in charge of collecting and redistributing that money, and they've been forced to dip into their reserves to keep cinemas going because nobody was laid off as a result of COVID-19. Now, you may have heard that some of the biggest cinema chains in the U.S. are worried that they may have to declare bankruptcy. I think that's very unlikely that anything like that will happen here in France because the government understands that cinema is an absolutely essential industry right there with manufacturing cars or having airlines. French filmgoers, of course, are willing to see older movies and to pay full price for them, but we do need some new films in the pipeline. And of course, film production was completely shut down and some movies had to stop in mid-path or just fell apart. And I think that money might be tight for future film shoots. We've got a backlog of things to see right now. And of course, for the foreseeable future, crowd scenes are absolutely out of the question.
As you say, Lisa, people are eager to get back to the cinema. Our reporter, Catherine Viette, takes a look at what's on offer.
At long last, cinephiles can rejoice as movies begin screening in France. Originally released in March, the film De Gaulle is making a timely comeback as France marks the 80th anniversary of the French leader's rallying wartime speech delivered on June 18th. De Gaulle joins a dozen other films whose runs were cut short by the coronavirus outbreak. Moviegoers can enjoy the fantasy film A Mermaid in Paris or the comedy Ducobu 3, which has already sold 1.3 million tickets.
Le roi de la triche est de retour.
Ça a commencé à monter encore plus et puis ça s'est arrêté. Et là, c'est génial que ça puisse... Enfin, je sais que c'est une situation un peu exceptionnelle, mais c'est génial que ça puisse revenir au cinéma. Ça lui donne une deuxième vie au film.
The same optimistic outlook for The Good Wife, another French comedy that also had its run shortened by lockdown measures. The film's distributor is so certain of its popularity that it's making additional copies available.
On va être sur 800 copies puisque tous les cinémas en fait nous demandent le film. Le film a fait ses preuves. Il a montré que ça pouvait être un gros succès public et forcément les cinémas, le succès entraînant le succès, ont envie de le programmer.
Of the films set to be screened this week, half will be re-released. Distributors are reluctant to introduce new films until they know whether people will want to go back to the cinemas. For their part, movie theaters are introducing strict sanitary measures.
Les mesures d'hygiène sont très simples. En fait, le masque sera obligatoire dans le hall des cinémas. Il y aura évidemment un sens de circulation pour les entrées et les sorties. Évidemment, gel partout. Les salles seront nettoyées entre chaque séance.
In the theater itself, masks won't be necessary, but social distancing will be enforced, with one seat out of two left empty, respecting the 1 meter spacing, unless you're with friends. A lot is riding on this week for the film industry.
One of the films due out was Mr. Jones. It was going to come out on the 18th of March, the day after lockdown began. It's based on a harrowing true story. Tell us more, Lisa.
Well, I'm so glad that this movie will be coming out on big screens because it's a big story, as big as the fate of millions of people. Mr. Jones, called Stalin's Shadow in France, is the beautifully made true story of a Welsh, Russian-speaking journalist who tried to tell the world that Stalin was actually starving the people in Ukraine in order to feed the Russians of the USSR and fool the outside world into thinking that that workers' paradise was functioning beautifully. Gareth Jones was the first English-speaking journalist to interview Adolf Hitler. And believe me, he didn't say questions like, Mr. Hitler, what's your favorite color? And could you share one of your favorite vegetarian recipes with us? His political instincts, Gareth Jones' political instincts, were absolutely superb, despite the fact that he was only in his 20s. And as a reporter, he was pretty much fearless, even though he had very good reason to be afraid.
Well, let's look at the dark atmosphere of Mr. Jones.
This is my report on the Soviet question.
What's your answer?
I don't have one. The Kremlin is broke. So how are the Soviets suddenly on a spending spree?
Paul, I need your help arranging an interview with Stalin.
Garrett, I've been trying to reach you.
Go see Walter Duranty at the New York Times. Listen, I really need to talk to you. I found something big. You can break the story wide open. Paul?
Agnieszka Holland has already completed another film since this one. She often tackles important pieces of history, doesn't she, Lisa?
Oh, absolutely. She knows her strong suit is drama, and she has a very finely honed political conscience. Agnieszka Holland is an outstanding director, period. But since we're keeping track of such things now, she also happens to be a woman filmmaker. From half Catholic, half Jewish parentage in Poland, she's often addressed the Holocaust, and she made Burning Bush, the true story of Jan Palach, who actually set fire to himself to protest in Czechoslovakia. She takes dark stories and she makes them absolutely riveting. Now, in addition to making feature films for over 30 years, she has also directed episodes of TV series, including The Wire and House of Cards. I was haunted by Mr. Jones for days after I saw it because it has so much to say about what real journalism should be. Eyewitness reportage, making the effort to have primary sources, checking everything yourself on the ground. And Peter Skarsgård is fascinating as the New York Times Moscow bureau chief, who, because of his personal beliefs, let's just say that the truth about what's going on doesn't always get out.
Okay, moving on. Christopher Nolan's new film Tenet is due out on the 31st of July, and his film Interstellar is being re-released in movie theatres here in France. And now you, Lisa, love his complex and dazzling work, don't you?
Oh, indeed I do. Christopher Nolan, also a reason I love him, is that he continues to shoot on celluloid film. And even if the final product is projected digitally, I really do think that putting those stories on film ultimately makes a difference. I'll admit that I don't completely understand the time-bending story that's going on in Interstellar when it came out 6 years ago, so I'm looking forward to seeing it a second time. I saw Nolan's Inception 3 times, and I have to say it just got richer with each showing. Sometimes there's so much going on that it's rewarding to go back. That's a good thing. However groundbreaking his visuals, I have to say the message has something to do with love as humans experience it, and how there shouldn't be any obstacles like, time and space to the enduring power of love.
Okay, Lisa, thank you so much. I'm so glad there's no more obstacles stopping you going to enjoy your precious cinema over the next few days. See you next week. We'll leave you with Christopher Nolan's Interstellar. Remember our website. We're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
Love is the one thing that transcends time and space.
Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light.
All right, Enrique.
Yes, you are. We'll find a way. We always have.